really, really dissonant if you put it on a high pad, and it sounds really, I mean, it's a little scary. You might say it's a little scary. Let's have a listen here. It's like someone's coming with the knife from the back. Hi guys, and welcome back for yet another video on weltsound. This time it's going to be about hard techno. Specifically, we want to have a look at how labels like our label group or Lenske have their own unique character sound. So therefore I made a project where I'm kind of doing my own interpretation of that work, and I would say let's just have a look in there. So first of all, let me show you what the whole thing sounds like. Let's just jump right in here into the little arrangement I made. Alright, so what's happening here? We want to have a look at the drums, we want to have a look at the melodics, and also at little tricks in the arrangement one by another. So I would say let's start on the drums with the kick drum and the rumble first. This one's actually really easy. It's two samples from my upcoming artist pack on weltsound, and yes, didn't really do a lot here. The samples work well like this. We can have a listen in solo. So what's really important here is the very distorted kick drum, and then again also the rumble, which in this case kind of feels like an eighth note rhythm, you know, always pumping between the kicks, and gives this kind of hard trance feeling, which is very interesting to have in the modern hard techno or industrial sound. The percussions are a little more interesting, so we have different layers here. First of all, we're starting with some kick percussions, which is just a recording of the echo of a kick drum transient. So let's have a listen here real quick. The recording is already processed, so nothing to do here. Here it gets a little more interesting, so because what I noticed, we will always have a big clap in those sounds or in a lot of tracks. I noticed that there's always some kind of specific rhythm kind of supporting the clap to not make it feel so static and being only on the 2 and 4, but you know, more like a groove and moving feeling. So I made those noise percussions here. This is just a random white noise sample I found. So basically what's interesting here, I painted an automation which looks like this, and it's gonna open and close the decay of the sound, and we can have a listen in solo together with the clap maybe already. So I think you get the idea, right? It's kind of filling the gaps between the clap and also making the transitions from one clap to another a little more interesting. And the echo is obviously pretty important here. I don't know if you know the trick. If you put the dry wet down, the echo shouldn't be really audible, but then if you put the input gain up, the delay signal, or the echo signal in this case, is gonna be much louder and also gets a little nice saturation. So that trick works well a lot of times. But that's not the only percussion. We have another percussion loop, and this one is really like a processing monster. So we're gonna have a listen first without the processing. This one's also part of the artist pack coming soon. And it's actually not really made for this kind of techno, but through the processing here, in the end it sounds like this. So basically what I'm doing here is having a good amount of distortion through the pedal and a vocoder with only 4 bands to make it feel more noisy. That's actually a good trick you can use also on hi-hats, on percussions, on a lot of different sounds. Use vocoder, try to play with the depth and the formant, and the release is also a nice automation option then to open up the sound and close it back again. In this case I didn't really need that, just put an echo on with the same trick here, only 16%, but a lot of input gain, so we get a louder echo, and just some EQing on the back. And the whole percussion groove together sounds like this. And it's actually not done by only looking at the single tracks. Here in the percussions I added this very, very wild distortion wave shaper. And it's actually a key element of another sound in the project, so we're gonna have a look at this soon. And there's also just a little bit of reverb. If we have a listen without those two. Right, we can hear that especially the saturator with this crazy wave shaper function gives a lot of nice crisp and high end and accentuation to the sound. And that's it on the percussion group actually. The hi-hats also not too complicated here. We have a 909 open for the offbeat, and there's actually no processing necessary in this case. And then we have a head loop, also not too much processing, just a nice sidechain compression here on top. And the cymbals, also same here, sidechain compression. And the pattern on the cymbals is a little more interesting, because usually what we know from cymbals would be a pattern like this maybe, or maybe the other way around with the accent on the kick. But what we have here is a 3/16th note coming from the kick and leaving the last 16th before the next kick free. So it sounds like this. And you can already kind of get the vibe that it's really aggressive and really straightforward. So works pretty well in this kind of hard techno sound. And definitely a pattern you can try here and there. Also important here on the group, we have a strong erosion with white noise. So that means we add a stereo noise signal to the existing hi-hats, which make them feel more kind of distorted, but more like rough and dirty. And that's exactly what we need for this hard techno sound. So all the drums together have a very, very rough and distorted feeling, and that's exactly what we need here. Alright, the next sound I want to talk about is the lead sound, and perhaps the most important one here. It kind of drives the energy forward. And what you see here, a little back in the signal chain, is this crazy wave shaper again. So we're gonna have a look at the sound from the beginning to the very end. I want to just put a loop here on a spot where the cutoff is kind of opened. And we can have a listen to it in solo again. So what's that sound like? It's very stereo, it's kind of moving actually, and then there's also a lot of noisy or distorted feeling, and it's really crispy and scratching, you know, like very, very dirty, and that's working very well in that sound. But how do we get there? Like, we have some plugins here, those 4, and they are kind of modeling the sound not too much. If we take them off, what we get is a nice sidechain, what we get is the bass cut away, some nice saturation to glue everything a little together, and this is an auto filter for the movement in the track. So those 4 are not too complicated, but those 3 here, they are actually very important. If we have a listen without those 3, it will actually sound pretty funny. You can hear that the signal is basically just a very, very filtered kind of saw wave signal. and only through the enormous crazy amount of distortion and erosion in this case also, the signal gets so heavily dirty and bright. We can have a look here real quick. This is really just a saw wave, and the second oscillator is also a saw wave, but got folded and a little warped through this modern algorithm. And it's actually nice, you can even automate this over the track. By the way, the whole project is available for you in the description, so you can play around with the wavetable sound. And actually this time everything is made Ableton only, so whoever's downloading this will be able to use and hear everything, right? So then we have the sub oscillator here to make the sound a little fatter. And yeah, this is what it sounds like. So what are the effects doing now? We have erosion again. It's white noise erosion, not noise erosion. You know, the difference is that noise is mono and white noise is stereo noise. So we have a list. So this one actually only adds a lot of, you know, noise on top, not too much else that's happening here. And then this chorus in the ensemble mode, which is new to Ableton 11 and is really nice actually, is doing a lot. So you can see it's on 100% wet, so a lot of chorus, and this will make the sound move around a little and, you know, be a little more diffuse. And it sounds like this. And you might be like, what? So how are we ending up now on the final sound? So the most work is actually done here by the saturator and those really, really weird settings. And I cannot tell you what exactly is happening here. And that's also not too important. You know, I cannot really tell you what exactly I did here. I mean, I know that I put a lot of drive, and I know that I wanted to use the wave shaper with those parameters down here to kind of get some crazy overtone structures. The depth is also a big part of it, so raising up the depth, if we compare this to a lower depth, you know, like this the focus is more on the mids, while like this the focus is more on the highs, you could say. But it's honestly just trying out and playing around. Having fun actually is a very important thing here, and at a certain point just saying, oh right, this is very nice, I'm gonna use this. So when I had those three in the chain together with the general sound, I started to add those kind of modeling effects, like a little sidechain, a little EQing, a little saturation, and the auto filter for the movement over the track. So everything's revolving around that sound, right? Let's have a look at the notes here real quick, because this is also interesting. I did the track in A sharp, and we see that the B here is actually not part of the A sharp scale, neither minor nor major. So that's a trick we actually see a lot of times in not only hard techno, actually all kinds of techno and even different music, to using the +1 semitone here, because it's actually not part of the scale, but it still sounds very nice if you combine it well. It has a lot of tension and kind of darkness to it. And then for myself, I figured out that the 7th note of the scale, so in this case the G sharp, works really well in the combination with the root and the +1. So this kind of combination of notes, we have the root, the +1, and the -2, which is +10, but 1 octave down, works pretty well here, I think. It's important to have this kind of dissonant and dark feeling to it. So let's have a look at the notes of the pad here, because they work in kind of the same way. We have the root note down here. You see there's the 5th, that's okay. And then there's a root note again, but wow, what's this? That's already looking a little weird to have those two notes in a chord like right next to each other. So that's the same thing here. We are utilizing the +1 semitone, and it sounds really dissonant if you put it on a high pad, and it sounds really, I mean, it's a little scary. You might say it's a little scary. Let's have a listen here. It's like someone's coming with the knife from the back, right? So let's have a look at the sound here real quick. while we're at it. It's also a wavetable patch, and there's a lot of reverb, as you can see, 2 instances. And I actually used the Ableton preset here, which sounded very nice, and then added another one I did by myself, just cutting the lows and having some sidechain here as well. And the sound itself is also not too complicated. Again, we have 2 saw waves, and the second one this time is not warped by the modern, but by the classic algorithm. So there's a pulse wave modulation, and we added some sync here. And what's actually really important here is the unison algorithm. Let's have a listen here if we put that away. Right, it kind of has the same quality because of the notes. It sounds dissonant and kind of scary, but the sound is it's just weak. There's no real substance, right? And if we add the shimmer algorithm here, we get the super wide and super kind of balanced sound in a lot of frequencies. It feels like a very thick sound, even though it's a relatively thin pad, you know. That's actually it about the pad. It's a very, very common sound in dark and hard techno in general, to have those very dissonant pads, and it's always a good try to have the root note and then the +1 included somewhere in there. You know, then we got to the perfect fifth here, but still playing the +1 on top. So it always has to be a little dissonant, and it most of the times is not in the scales. So don't try to stick too much to scales if you make dark or hard techno, right? We also have an atmosphere here. It's not really interesting. It's just a resampled version of the pad 1 octave down. But it works very well as a kind of floor for the sound. And then the last element I want to have a look at here is the voice. And it's happening in a lot of tracks to have those kind of background voices. It's not, most of the time it's not even audible what they say. And I just grabbed this sample here from Splice and added a lot of echo and then a lot of reverb. And I just saw this is actually not Ableton, so I'm gonna freeze this. But the vintage verb here really does a good job in kind of diffusing everything, so you're gonna get the frozen version of the vocal. Yes, and it sounds like this. You probably heard that voice before. It's in a lot of techno tracks. And yeah, it's just there to open up some spaces at some certain moments and then kind of fade back into the hard part. And that's it. We've gone through all the sounds, so we should maybe just have a quick look at some stuff in the arrangement. What's interesting here, or what's very common, is having those kick hits within a break. And actually, most of the times, if you try this and you just put a kick, it will sound a little weak. So you might need to add some rumble and maybe just do a little crossfade here so it doesn't blow up too much after the kick, right? Opening up a space again, already kind of telling the listener that there is something coming. He might even think, oh, that's the drop, but then it's not the drop. And he's like, oh, I didn't expect that, you know? So always a nice trick. Works in a lot of genres, but is especially used a lot in those kind of hard techno or even hard trance stuff that's so big and famous right now. One more thing I want to show you is a very, very standard thing, but if you don't know how it's done, you might ask yourself, why does it sound like this? So I just want to show it to you. If you know it, that's fine. If you don't know it, you're gonna learn something very cool. And what I want to show you is, you know it from a lot of hard techno tracks, maybe think Klangkuenstler, where it kind of feels like the vinyl, if it was on a vinyl, was spinned backwards, you know, in front of the drops most of the times. So what that actually is only the hi-hats and maybe also the percussions recorded and actually played the other way around. So I'm gonna show you real quick how to do this, because actually right in front of the drop we could do this and it would sound very nice, I think. So let's resample the head loop and the 909. Right, and we can cut it here, consolidate and reverse. And now we just take away the hi-hats here and it will sound like this. Right, something like this in a way. You can just get the project file and try for yourself. Just follow the link in the description, as I said before. That's actually everything I wanted to tell you about this project. Get it for yourself, experiment with the sound, especially this lead sound is something that you can really try to use in your own productions as well. So that was my interpretation of our label group, Lenske, and many other hard techno artists or labels. And I hope you liked it. I hope you can do something with the project file, have fun with it, and I hopefully see you next time on the new video.